Hi, and welcome back to Chapter 9 in your Commercial Transactions curriculum. Today we're going to talk about performance and discharge of a contract. So far we've been over a common law analysis of contracts to include offer and acceptance, consideration, mutual assent, capacity, legality, and whether or not a contract needs to be in writing. Now we're going to switch gears and we're going to start talking about performance and discharge of obligations. After reading this chapter, I want you to be able to differentiate a condition precedent, a condition subsequent, and a concurrent condition. I want you to be able to list the methods of discharging contractual obligations, to be able to identify when contracts are discharged for non-performance, to classify the different methods of discharging contracts, and to describe the proper circumstances for a contract modification and its requirements. So far this semester what we've talked about is whether or not a contract has been formed. Everything we've talked about in chapters 1 through 8 is a common law analysis of whether or not we have a legally binding agreement. Once we have determined that we have a legally binding agreement, it's time to analyze performance. What are the performance obligations? What are the parties' duties and obligations under the contract that is now legally binding? Oftentimes with contracts we see conditions to performance, things that have to happen before, during, or after that trigger one or the other party's performance under the contract. A condition that qualifies the contractual obligation of a party is called a condition precedent, a concurrent condition, a condition subsequent, and they can be express or they can be implied. Each type of condition bears on a party's contractual obligations under this binding agreement that we now have. So let's take a look at each one of these. A condition precedent is a condition that qualifies a contractual obligation or qualifies one party's performance under the obligation to something that has to happen before that obligation arises. Probably the most typical example of a condition precedent is a real estate contract. If you go to purchase a house or a piece of property, there's usually a condition precedent that you qualify for financing. In other words, you sign an agreement to purchase a house, but your obligation to actually purchase that house is qualified on you getting financing for the purchase. So the financing piece would be a condition precedent to your obligation to go through with the purchase of the house. If, however, the buyer doesn't qualify for purchasing, neither party, neither the buyer nor the seller, has any further obligation under the contract. So that's a condition precedent to performance. Sometimes it's easier to think of condition precedents as condition precedent, another way to pronounce precedent. Condition precedent has to precede your obligations under the contract. Another type of condition we see is a condition concurrent or a concurrent condition. And if a precedent is a condition that has to happen beforehand, concurrent is where both of the parties have conditions at the same time. In other words, let's go back to our example of buying a house. Once the buyer qualifies for financing, now they have an obligation to go through with the purchase. There's a condition concurrent at the time of closing, and that condition concurrent is one party, the seller, is going to turn over title to the house, and the other party, the buyer, is going to turn over the money to purchase the house. So those are conditions concurrent. The final type of condition we'll talk about is condition subsequent. Subsequent obviously meaning afterwards. This is common in insurance contracts. If you come together with an insurance company and you make an agreement that you will pay the premiums if they will pay for any accidents that you have. Once the agreement is made and the premium payments are made, there's a condition subsequent before the insurance company will pay out, and that's the actual accident or the damage to the car. So a condition subsequent to a contractual obligation to pay by the insurance company. These conditions that we've talked about can either be expressed or implied. An express condition is one that is stated on the face of the contract. It's known to both parties. Implied, on the other hand, can be inferred or presumed under the law. We usually see implied conditions when it's not actually stated in the contract, but in order to ensure fairness, the court will imply some type of condition after the fact. So now we've worked our way through the analysis as to whether or not we have a binding agreement, whether or not we have a contract. We've worked through our conditions, precedent or precedent, concurrent, and subsequent. So now the parties' obligations under the contract have arisen. And once the obligations arise, they have to be discharged in some way. One way to discharge your obligations is to actually perform, do what you're supposed to under the contract. You can also discharge them by an agreement to let them go. Non-performance might be a default, or there might be some operation of law that makes the obligation go away, discharges the obligation by operation of law. But the bottom line is that when a discharge occurs, it relieves a party to a contract of that particular obligation, or possibly all of their obligations. So the most common way for obligations to be discharged is by the parties performing their obligations, actually doing what is required under the contract. But what happens if there's partial performance? In other words, we've substantially performed our duties, and there's some minor deviation from full performance. Does that qualify us for a discharge of the obligation? The answer is maybe. Whether or not the performance is enough, substantial enough to discharge the obligation, is going to depend on several things. It's going to depend on whether or not it is a minor deviation from full performance or a significant deviation. In other words, is the deviation inconsequential, or does it go to the heart of the contract? Let me give you an example. If you ask someone to build a house for you, and you want one of the rooms painted blue and the rest painted white, they build the house, everything is done exactly the way you want it, but they paint that one room white instead of blue like you wanted it. That would be considered substantial performance on the part of the builder. You wouldn't be able to get out of your contract to pay for the house because they failed to paint one room the color you wanted. It is an inconsequential deviation from the heart of the contract. On the other hand, if you ask for a house to be built with 8 rooms and the builder builds you a house with 7 rooms, that's a substantial deviation. That's a big difference in what you paid for. So in this case, while you will still have to pay for the house, there's equity will demand that there be some reduction in the price. So there is performance, but it's not complete performance. It's substantial, and it is a significant deviation. So if we don't have discharge by performance or substantial performance, we may have discharge of obligations by agreement of the parties. There's a couple of different ways we can categorize discharge by agreement. The first would be rescission. That's a voluntary mutual agreement between the parties to end the contract. Both the buyer and the seller of a house get together and say, I no longer want to buy. The seller says, I no longer want to sell. So they voluntarily and they mutually agree to end their obligations under the contract. Whenever you are discharging by agreement, you want to make sure you have a release, and most likely in writing. A release is a written document that relieves parties with contractual duties. Because if you have a written agreement and the parties come together and orally decide by agreement to discharge their obligations, there's no record of it. So you want that written release. Another type of discharge by agreement is called a novation, and that's when the parties get together and they say, we don't want to end our agreement altogether, but we do want to substitute all or part of this agreement for a new one. A novation discharges the original obligations and substitutes new obligations. So the agreement doesn't necessarily go away, but some parts of it are changed through a novation. So let's say that we have a contract that's legally binding and there's some type of dispute between the parties, but they come together and they mutually agree on a settlement. Again, you want to be able to document this through something called an accord and satisfaction. And this is a discharge by agreement saying that the parties have settled the dispute. So we've talked about discharge by performance or substantial performance, discharge by agreement, but what happens if there's non-performance? Can there be a discharge by non-performance? And the answer is yes. For instance, if we have a contract for the purchase of a field full of wheat, and in between the time of the making of the contract and the time of delivery of the wheat, there is a swarm of locusts that comes in and eats all of the wheat. Well, the destruction of the subject matter of the contract means that it has become impossible for the seller to perform, and their obligations are discharged because it has become impossible based on the destruction of the subject matter. Same kind of thing happens if we have the death of a provider of unique services. If there's someone that can do the same thing, we have a large company and several people in the company can do that particular service, then the obligation would not be discharged on behalf of the company. However, if it's an individual and they're the only one that can that can provide that unique service, and that service provider dies, it's sort of like destruction of the subject matter, right? Because they can no longer perform, and that would be a discharge by non-performance. And finally, supervening illegality. In between the time of making of the contract and performance of the contract, whatever was supposed to be done under the terms of the contract, the obligations become illegal for some reason. The legislature gets together and decide that it's no longer legal for that particular thing to happen or for that particular thing to be sold. That supervening illegality would create a discharge by non-performance. Under that same heading of discharge by non-performance, what happens sometimes when parties to a contract don't perform is we have a breach of contract, and that's a material non-performance of an obligation. And what that means is if there's a contract that requires some act or requires the delivery of some good, and that doesn't happen, then the performance has been breach of an obligation, usually has consequences in a contractual agreement. Finally, let's talk about discharge by operation of laws. Under bankruptcy or the statute of limitations, obligations can be wiped out by operation of law. For instance, in a bankruptcy, what's happening is the debtor's contractual obligations or duties are submitted to the court, and the court is going to waive those obligations. They will no longer be obligated to pay for things or to perform on contracts, and that's under federal law. The last thing we'll talk about today is contract modifications or modifications of obligations. It's not a discharge of an obligation, but it's a modification of an obligation. Sometimes when parties are in a dispute or one party thinks they might not be able to perform, they'll ask for a change to the original contract's terms. Enforcement of this modification on the other party depends on the circumstances surrounding the change. It can't be made under duress or in bad faith. And there's a very famous case about a Hollywood actor who signed a contract to perform in a movie and then halfway through the movie threatened to leave unless he was paid more money. Well, he already had a contractual obligation to be there, and the threat of leaving would have cost the movie house quite a bit of money. So the movie house agreed during the movie, but then afterwards sued so that they wouldn't have to pay that additional money, and actually won because the contract modification was made under duress and it was made in bad faith by the actor. Also keep in mind that in order to change a validly existing contract, some states are going to require some new consideration. So it's sort of a mini agreement that will have to have offer, acceptance, mutual assent, consideration, and all the elements that go along with the original contract. So let's just summarize what we've talked about here today. Conditions may place a contingency on a party's contract performance before their obligations arise. They may qualify performance by condition precedent or precedent, subsequent or concurrent conditions. And they may also be expressed where they're written to the face of the contract or implied in law. Discharge of an obligation relieves a party of their contractual obligations. One of the methods of discharge is performance. It can also occur by agreement, non-performance, or operation of law. And finally, modification is a method of changing the party's obligations to a contract. It can occur when unforeseen circumstances arise or some undue hardship would result if the contract was performed. So that's all we have for today. I hope you have a great week. As always, if you have any questions, don't hesitate to contact me, and we'll talk again soon.